Welcome to the InStory Show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host, and this is our summer edition on how empaths do it, how to turn your sensitivities into your strengths. And today I am thrilled to welcome Monique Leerschool. Welcome, Monique.
Thank you, Devorah. It's wonderful to be here talking across the world.
Amazing. I know, all the way from New Zealand.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to read a little bit about you and then we will dive in. Most of her life, Monique has lived among trees at the end of a rural road in different parts of the world. As an eco-shaper and environmental mentor, Monique supports women who want to transform their environmental grief and anxiety and make a difference in the world. She helps women with self-care, resilience, and care for nature. After planting thousands of homegrown trees on their family farm in New Zealand, Monique draws on her practical nature restoration experiences to empower people to make small changes and take ongoing action on an individual and collective level. She works with the wisdom of trees, nature experiences, creative communications, and holistic health approaches. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Agriculture, graduate diploma in social science with a distinction in medical anthropology. Just in case you were wondering, she doesn't come by this wisdom with no effort. So, Monique, welcome. I'm so excited that you're going to talk about trees, which are like my favorite thing in the world, of which I have studied nothing. So just that they make my whole soul feel happy. So tell a little bit about like the whole way that you started to have this sense that you were uniquely and powerfully connected to nature.
I grew up in Holland, as you probably can hear, and I was born in Sertogenbos, which means the forest of the Duke. And the place where I lived had many, many trees in the landscape, wind shelters, forests, blocks. And so I was always surrounded by trees. And my mom had a batch in the forest. I would spend a lot of time there. And in the Finnish, we lived in a forest, in fact. And so I discovered from a very early age that whenever I was outside among the trees, I felt really good working with my hands in the land. And so I didn't really realize there was anything special about me, or that I had any special challenges growing up. So that came much later. I found it really hard to be a teenager, for instance. And when I left home to study on agriculture college, that's when really things started to, in a way, fall apart. And so that took me on the whole journey of finding out who I was and what was happening and reconnecting to myself, basically. During the other journey in the landscape, really, because I became really aware of how landscapes and buildings can affect me. I lived in Zambia for a while, and that was also at the end of the road and among trees and in the outbacks, and being exposed to a totally different culture. And when we went back to Holland, we had a real culture shock because we lived in a completely different landscape from where we grew up, my husband and I, and we felt totally disconnected from it, and we couldn't settle back in the whole Dutch way of living. So we immigrated to New Zealand with the view of purchasing a farm, and because that wasn't possible in Holland. And we bought our land and been there for quite a few decades now. And it's been a wonderful teacher for me personally and environmentally. And it's not an economic unit. So we had to make really some deep decisions about where we were fitting with it. And we committed to being earth guardians and preserving it and improving it for future generations.
Wow. Okay, but you know what? I'm going to make you back up a little bit because...
Yeah, I skipped through my life.
I always do this to people. I make people back up and kind of dive in because I really love to hear those kind of turning point moments, because for almost all of us who are empathic and highly sensitive, intuitive, that it wasn't like this beautiful flow of acceptance and the world just loves us that way. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about kind of like where it got, like, you know, it usually starts out fine when you're little, and
Yeah.
then it gets shut down somehow. So maybe you can talk a little bit about just what happened to you, like how, because you have this natural connection with the land from when you were a kid, right?
I think that was always accepted. That was part of who we could be. We didn't have many conversations where I grew up about our feelings and what was happening to us. There was no space for that. That was really shut down, and that sort of locked into my body, I would think. Yeah.
But you had a sense that being in nature was fine, right?
Yeah, so I had a real sense of what worked for me. So I would go on help out a veterinary surgeon and really loved being in rural situations among animals and among rural people. And so I had a clear sense of where I felt right, but I didn't know where I was growing, whether that was good or bad. I felt that was the norm, basically. So I had no awareness of what was happening basically to me.
But then tell us a little bit about your continued story. Like, how did you end up studying what you studied? And then when did you feel like it became hard to move forward with your vision?
So I went to agriculture college, and that was in a polder in a grey building. And I started to suffer really badly from anxiety attacks, and I had no idea what was happening for me. And I felt really scared, and it went quickly from a bit to quite extensive attacks, and it went very quickly from being safe in many situations to feeling unsafe in many situations. So I had no idea what was happening, and I asked my parents for help, and I was sent to a health professional. And I talked about that there probably were family problems which needed some attention, but that was totally ignored and discounted. It was the feedback I got, what is happening is normal and there's nothing to worry about. So that shut down that conversation really quickly. And the health professionals really wanted to give me medication, and I wasn't interested in medication. So lucky enough, I had a sense of it wasn't working for me. So that was the first time where I really felt this is not working for me, and I'm not going to continue with this. So I'm really happy I've got that part in me, a kind of a rebel, which has got a real sense of surviving. And I also knew there was a easier and a better life for me. So that then sent me on a search party of, so where could I get help? And so I discovered all sorts of tools and people. So I discovered that it's important for me to find the right person I really relate to and I feel safe with, and that their methodology or the way what they do as an intervention harmonizes with me. And so again, that's where I have a clear sense, yes, that works for me. And I would try things, and if it didn't work, I would leave it. And so I discovered, for instance, yoga is really good for me because yoga teaches you where your breathing is, and I had no idea about my body. So what I discovered through that whole journey is that I didn't have the language to talk about what was happening internally, and I had to learn that. And also I needed a framework about what was happening, and I needed to reconnect with my body, because what happens when you've got anxiety attacks, except for me, what happens for me is you end up feeling incredibly fragmented, and it's like you go to pieces and you don't know who you are in the finish. And what I needed to do is go back inside myself and find that anchor and find the safety in myself, in order to be with the anxiety, basically. So I had to deep dive into the anxiety to come out in the other end. And that was happening in the meantime while other work was happening, and I was doing other work, but it taught me a lot, and I did come out on the other end. And what I discovered with it is that I'm quite intuitive when it comes to people, and that led me to being invited to become a counselor, and I could really see potential in people. I had to learn to be quite aware of who I was and have boundaries and have self-care in place. That's incredibly critical if you want to do that work. So we can be of service to others with our intuition and sensitivity, but if we don't look after ourselves, you burn out really quickly. I was really interested to find other ways of how I could work with people, so I became a tutor. And again, it's important to know how I learn and what is best for me, but other people learn in quite a different way. So my intuition helped again to do that. So I really enjoyed that. And again, I could see the potential in people, and I was working a lot with people who had really bad experiences in the education world here in New Zealand, and came back to education as an adult. So they brought a lot of pain with them. And so it was not easy for them to study. And so they would come up against their own obstacles very often. But that was really fantastic work. And yeah, my intuition and my perception then led me into other work on working on health in, say, a government level, where all sorts of ideas come together. And I think what I discovered is that I'm a very good problem solver, and because I can listen to people and understand where they come from, I'm able to hear people's perspective and see the picture of how it all fits together. But that world of government, for instance, that was so abstract that for me, what I discovered, it wasn't enough. I didn't get the feeling I was really doing what I needed to do, that I needed to be far more practically working. Yeah, it was like the land was calling me back. And that's when I started to really become interested in environmental issues, and seeing what was happening in my environment and how it was polluting, how the climate was changing. And even though that feels incredibly overwhelming, I knew that I had to start in my own life, in my own backyard. And I started to grow my own trees. And that's such a creative, wonderful process to take little seeds into big trees. And I've got some trees standing next to me as my companions. And it's quite a creative process to reforest the land. And so that feels to me as an important action I'm taking on behalf of the world and what is happening. We're planting roughly 1,000 trees every year, and the landscape is really transforming immensely. So that to me is important, to be practically responding to these outer challenges, rather than having an intellectual kind of understanding of it. But I do voluntary work as well in our community. I'm a guide in an eco park, and I talk to tourists about the birds and the trees, to reconnect them with nature, to get them to really feel and see and hear it. And that feels incredibly to be part of such an inspiration story of success of restoring the land and the native ecosystem there. So, yeah.
It's, you know, what's amazing to me, and it was, Monique is part of my InStory group, and so we've talked before, and it's just something I'm going to pull forward because I was so inspired when we talked before, Monique, about this whole concept of not just restoring the land, but restoring our souls, like these two streams that when you restore the wholeness of your being, I don't know, somehow you become strong enough to restore the wholeness of the land. And it feels like that somehow embodies your journey to restore your own wholeness, which I think has really empowered you to do this work about restoring the land. So maybe you can talk about that some.
Yes. So thank you for reminding me about that. So I think that whole period of anxiety attacks and going inward and making myself whole, and really, I think I came out a much stronger, much more resilient person, and far more able to know who I am and to know what I've got to offer. So that ultimately was a gift. Although, you know, when you're in it, you feel, oh my God, I wish I could leave this behind or get through this. I do remember going to a workshop, and that was on the stewardship of New Zealand. So how we could become more stronger, more effective guardians of nature in New Zealand. And during the workshop, we did a meditation, and I can't remember the meditation at all, except that I fell in this incredible deep hole of black, no boundaries, incredible amount of grief and sadness. And I just cried and cried and cried. And I don't think I would have been able to enter that space if I hadn't had that whole anxiety, personal adventure and journey before that. And I didn't know what it was, and I cried and I cried. And the workshop leader eventually came and just pulled me out of it because I didn't know how to stop it. And I really liked her explanation that somehow I had tapped into the deep grief and sadness most women feel, and the deep grief and the loss of life, which was happening all over the world. So that's when I really decided I wanted to. That's when I started to feel my calling in terms of I needed to work with trees. The tree of life started to emerge as a kind of a symbol, and feminine energy started to really come to the fore too. And a few years later, I remember also a moment which was quite significant for me. I'd gone on a tour to Latin America, and I had an opportunity to go to Machu Picchu. So I have been aware that certain physical places call me, and I have been able usually to go there, and I had no idea what was calling me there. And it's not always the place itself which is then talking to me. I had studied medical anthropology, and I was really interested in Quechua Indians and their rituals with coca leaves. And I'd asked around, and it just happened to be the month of Pachamama, which is the Earth Mother, where people in Peru do rituals for Pachamama because that's the time when the earth is open. So I was incredibly fortunate to be introduced to a healer who had walked 3 days through the mountains, who will come into Cusco during August to do rituals for and with people. And it was just amazing to be part of it, even though I didn't understand him. I had two translators from Quechua to Spanish, Spanish to English. I just felt what he was doing was so important and so significant. And he made this beautiful mandala with seeds, colored seeds and flowers, and it had a male and a female part. And it was so incredibly beautiful. And it really made such an impact on me that I can't even explain what it did, except that I really got the concept of being anchored into the earth much more deeper, and that there's an incredible beauty in nature, and that we really need to not only take but give back and honor it and celebrate the earth and look after it. I really got that from it.
It strikes me that it really integrated the coming out of the hole. You know, that idea that you became whole enough. It's a great play on words in English, of course. Coming out of the hole to become a whole. But anyway.
Yeah, no.
But that it strikes me that that wholeness you created allowed you to then have this very deep, perceptive, visceral, integrated experience with the land.
Yeah, definitely. And so
yeah, so say more about kind of where that led you.
Yeah, so my deep sort of sense that I had to respond to the earth, that I was connected to the earth, and then becoming aware of the incredible environmental challenge we have. And I've been to public health conferences where there is open debate about if we don't change anything, then life will be, as we know it, will come to an end by 2100. So it's really incredibly critical. And what I noticed is that it's so huge, and that's how it felt to me too when I started to think about it, that it's important to find a place where it's safe. So if it's about being able to act, then it's about being able to be connected to your body and be connected to your self-care and be connected to your resilience and your strength, and to take it from there and then look at your unique kind of gifts and skills you have to make a contribution. And so it's about going inward first and then gathering up all those strengths and energies and then going out, rather than just feeling overwhelmed or trying to do something and then burn out. Yeah.
And so, so say a little bit more about now what you're up to on your land, and what, like, describe a little more about how this has become more integrated for you, because you do all this work that has to do with the wholeness of your personal being, and also you're doing all this planting and work on the land. So speak a little bit, you know, like it strikes me as that this whole vision of restoring oneself and restoring the land. So I want you to start to speak that vision. Like, I just love what you do in the world.
So I feel called to not only look after our land and restore it. So the restoration is quite practical. That is to grow trees, native trees, and plant them. And it's not an economical farm, so we're funding it all ourselves. And but it's about priority shifting. So for me, it's about finding actions in my own life, how to live environmentally in a responsible way. So I have decided that my carbon footprint in terms of flying was a problem. So I have cut back on my international flights quite drastically. I look at how where my finances go, and try to free up money so I can support other projects. I will write to government when there are consultations to do with environmental issues. So the vision I have is also to work with women, and women who feel overwhelmed by the environmental crisis, and help them to reconnect with their own body through creative means, you know, through gentle means, to find that anchor inside, to find that internal tree, and find your grounding in your body and your resilience, and then to come out in simple, easy actions, because there is a road, there are answers, and it's a matter of taking small baby steps and gain confidence and strength in your place in it all, so that everybody can make a difference.
So, so talk a little bit about like sort of more of what you're now doing in New Zealand, and then that's going to kind of lead us into what people can do and what your free gift is, and where, you know, because part of this is leading people forward to be able to think differently and then take action.
So at the moment I am offering meditations. I have also conduct of facilitated groups where we go out in nature and find inspiration from nature. I have helped people with understanding maybe political issues. So I'm not sure how to answer the question, sorry. Can you repeat it again?
Yeah, no, that's exactly like, how are you helping people to both get in touch with themselves and then become more strengthened to do work in the land?
Yeah.
Okay. So say a little bit more about that.
So it is about focusing internally first, and to make friends with what is happening internally, with your internal landscape, because everybody has got an internal landscape. To find your internal tree, because everybody has got that. It's like an archetype. And so that you can feel that anchor and that structure and that support inside you. And then to come out and have a look at your life and decide step by step, action by action, what it is in terms of your finance, in terms of your carbon use, what small changes you can implement.
So describe your free gift a little bit more for the summit, because it relates to what you just said.
Yeah. So my free gift is a short meditation. It's meditation to relax, because as we feel overwhelmed and anxious, relaxations are an incredibly important tool to have and to learn. And also relaxation, and to find that inner sanctuary and safety, because when we're anxious, our body feels incredibly scary, and we run away from it, but we do have our inner safety. So it's about finding that inner safety, finding the inner tree, feeling rooted, really embodying the tree as a safe symbol. And then to ask yourself in that meditation what it is, for what you can do for yourself, for self-care, how you can look after yourself in a tiny little better way, and what you can do outwardly in action to help nature, to help the trees. Because as you meditate on your internal tree, what you will find is that will help you connect not only to your body, but to your outer landscape and the trees in your landscape.
You know, most of the people who follow me know I'm such a big fan of metaphor. So I completely love that you're using the word landscape for an inner landscape, and what's your inner trees in your inner landscape, and that everyone get her meditation, get Monique's meditation, because you'll really love it. And I love your inner tree. What tree do you have? What's your inner tree like? And this kind of reshaping how we see ourselves is a big part of the whole concept of this whole show, which is that we had this vision of ourselves and our gifts, and then we shut them down, and now we get to have them back. And what what inspires me so much about you, Monique, is this concept of restoring the landscape that works in you so that you become strong enough to be part of restoring the landscape that works for our planet. And I just didn't see and say them together in the way you do with this whole concept of restoring. Because a lot of times people will think about healing, fixing, changing, but this concept of restoring, I think, is a deep idea. And so just, we're coming near the end, but maybe you can say a little bit more about the concept of restoring something. Like, why is that so? What does it mean? Why is it so significant?
In my experience, it's really important to do all the healing work. In terms of change, what is important, and it's really important to have hope. It's also incredibly important to have active hope and to get involved with actions, because actions will ultimately change us in the outer world. So it's changing your inner landscape, your inner mindset, and then changing through actions, step by step, your outer world.
That expression, that to have active hope, I really like that. There are some of the things you say, Monique, just are so powerful. This concept of changing your inner landscape so you can change the outer, having active hope, restoring your wholeness of your being and restoring the wholeness of the land. Like, it lights me up so much because it's not specifically the work I do, but it's the benefit I receive. Like, I go into those very trees and I know how much my soul is restored and my being is nourished. So, it's, and the other thing it did for me is when I hear sometimes people talk about environmental things, I feel overwhelmed. But when you say, begin by restoring yourself, so then you have the strength and the wholeness to then choose where your work is to restore our earth, our planet. And so it feels like this very balanced and very empowered place. And so I feel that for this whole series, that's what we're learning to do. And I think you're a very powerful model of that in the area of nature.
Yeah, so I think that maybe for the women who are experiencing grief and anxiety at the moment and panic attacks, maybe it might be useful to ask yourself, is this got to do anything with the environmental challenges we face? And it would be a perfect normal response to have to this incredible urgency. And unfortunately, I don't think there are many health professionals or therapists or people who have put two and two together that might be happening. So that there are not many interventions for people. It's to make that connection and then to come out of that environmental anxiety. So it's important that we learn to make the connection and to move out of that space safely and gradually so that we can make the inner and the outer change.
It's very important you're talking about this because, like you said, it's not so talked about, and that's part of my passion for this series, is to talk about these things that were never talked about. So first of all, we're going to all be in the Facebook group. So Monique will be in there. You can find her, connect with her. You can get her free gift, which is a very powerful meditation, and it will allow you to be connected with her. And you have some resources for how to support Tree Sisters, right?
Yeah, so that's an organization I really very much admire. So what I've been doing too is look for heroes and books and films which inspire me. It's all very well to look at the media and be bombarded with negativity, but I need to find answers. I need to find pathways. I need to have modeling and examples. And Tree Sisters definitely is such an exciting, inspiring story. It's a global organization, and they work on two levels. So they work on, in terms of climate change, they have identified that tropical reforestation is a major response and a very effective response. So they raise funds so that they can help and support tropical reforestation. It will help with the carbon sequestration, and it will help with the restoring the weather patterns globally. And secondly, they work on women consciousness and leadership, and they're doing amazing work. So they've got so many tools. It's such a wonderful network. They're so worthwhile, and they really need to be sponsored far more widely by women who really connect to that.
Good. Yeah, that's why I wanted you to mention it, because so much, you know, you're like Earth Guardians yourselves, and you're visionary in this area. And so I want people to be inspired about this, and I think you're such an inspiration. And so people will be able to get your free gift and be connected in your world, because look, Monique is just, this is not the end of the line. She's creating programs. There's a whole concept of restore being created. So get in her world, stay connected, and check out, you know, the Tree Sisters as well. And then share with us your nature stories, your tree stories, how you're coming out of your own anxiety, grief stories, and we will connect with you. You can do that inside the Facebook group for the InStory Show and with Monique directly. So Monique, as we wrap up, leave us with just a few last words of wisdom.
My words of wisdom, it is possible to restore your connection with your body and feel much better in your body. And it is possible to restore our outer worlds, and we all can come out the other end. So I'm cheering you on, you know, take a step, baby steps, and believe in yourself.
That is beautiful. I couldn't have said it better. And you're giving us that path of active hope. I just love that so much. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Monique, thank you. And everybody, as I always say in parting, remember to go out in the world, share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Bye, folks.